The global economic landscape is currently undergoing an unprecedented and rapid transformation as President Donald Trump's sweeping tariff policies reshape international trade relations and send ripples through industries worldwide. With a self-imposed August 7 deadline for new duties looming, a flurry of executive orders and bilateral negotiations have defined the past week, ushering in a new era of protectionism that challenges decades of established global trade norms. This aggressive recalibration of the America First agenda has left many trading partners reeling while raising significant questions about its domestic economic impact. At the heart of the administration's policy is a stark disconnect between its stated goals and the emerging economic realities on the ground. President Trump has consistently pledged to end inflation and make America affordable again, promising that tariffs would generate trillions for the federal government and eliminate trade deficits. However, the reality for American consumers and businesses appears to be quite different. The Budget Lab at Yale estimates that the short-term price impact of these tariff changes is equivalent to an average per household income loss of $2,400. While the White House has claimed inflation is dead, everyday Americans are still shelling out more on groceries each month, as The Guardian aptly notes, highlighting the gap between rhetoric and lived experience. Trump himself, when pressed on potential price rises, once bizarrely suggested American children might have to settle for $2 instead of $30, a comment that did little to assuage concerns about the policy's real-world costs. Indeed, the economic headwinds are already becoming palpable. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell recently acknowledged the early beginnings of tariff inflation, observing that companies are learning to cross the street in a group when it comes to raising prices. This trend is evident across various sectors, with Procter & Gamble announcing a 2.5% price hike, Mondelez planning surgical price increases, and L'Oreal affirming similar intentions. Even industrial equipment manufacturer Graco Incorporated noted it waited to see competitor moves before raising its own prices, illustrating a collective industry response to rising import costs. The domestic labor market, too, has shown signs of strain, with official data revealing a stall this summer, a development that prompted President Trump to unceremoniously fire Bureau of Labor Statistics Commissioner Erica McIntyre for alleging without evidence that the numbers had been rigged. This move underscores the administration's efforts to control the narrative even as evidence of economic drawbacks mounts. Internationally, the new tariff regime has created a tiered system of duties, with rates ranging from 10% for some nations to a staggering 50% for others. The European Union, for instance, faces a flat 15% tariff on goods including cars and car parts, with the EU anticipating continued turbulence in its trade dealings with the US. Meanwhile, Switzerland has been particularly hard hit with a 39% tariff, a massive shock that industry associations warn could jeopardize tens of thousands of jobs and potentially trigger a recession in the country despite its status as a major gold refining hub. Perhaps the most significant flashpoint has emerged with India, a key U.S. security partner in Asia. Despite initial hopes for a favorable trade deal, President Trump has threatened to substantially raise tariffs on Indian imports, already among the highest at 25%, citing India's massive purchases of Russian oil. India has fiercely pushed back, calling the criticism unjustified and unreasonable, and accusing the U.S. of a double standard, noting that it was previously actively encouraged by the U.S. to buy Russian oil to stabilize global energy markets. This escalating trade dispute threatens to undo 2 decades of steadily improving relations between the two nations, as Dhruva Jaishankar of the Observer Research Foundation America warned. The tension is also placing domestic political pressure on Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who had initially mirrored Trump's "Make India Great Again" rhetoric. Beyond oil, Trump has also needled India over American companies shifting manufacturing there, reportedly telling Apple CEO Tim Cook, "I don't want you building in India," despite the country producing 44% of U.S. smartphone imports last quarter. Other nations are navigating this volatile landscape with varied outcomes. Canada faces a 35% tariff, with Trump linking the increase to Canada's support for Palestinian statehood. Mexico secured a 90-day reprieve on higher tariffs, though other duties remain. South Korea, in contrast, reached a deal for a 15% tariff rate coupled with a commitment to $350 billion in U.S.-controlled investments and $100 billion in LNG purchases. Pakistan also struck a trade agreement that could see the U.S. develop its oil reserves and lower tariffs. Even the global copper market has been rocked by a 50% tariff on certain imports, though refined forms were exempted, causing a record plunge in U.S. prices. The consensus among trade experts is grim. In this new protectionist paradigm, everybody's a loser, as Barry Appleton, co-director of the Center for International Law at the New York Law School, observed. The old global economic order built on agreed-upon rules has been dismantled, replaced by a system where the U.S. unilaterally sets the terms using its immense economic power to extract concessions. While some countries have managed to secure deals that mitigate the pain, the long-term viability of these arrangements and the overall health of the global economy remain deeply uncertain. As the dust settles on this intense period of tariff imposition and negotiation, the world watches closely. The coming months will reveal the true extent of these policies' impact on global supply chains, corporate profits, and the everyday lives of consumers. Businesses reliant on international trade face an unpredictable future, while geopolitical alliances are being tested and reshaped. The current administration's actions mark a profound shift, signaling an era where economic policy is wielded as a primary instrument of foreign policy with far-reaching and as yet unquantifiable consequences for the future of global commerce and cooperation. In a dramatic reshaping of global commerce, President Donald Trump's second term has ushered in an unprecedented era of tariff-driven trade policy, with a flurry of executive orders and bilateral deals culminating in sweeping new duties set to take full effect this week. The administration's aggressive stance aimed at rebalancing trade deficits and asserting economic leverage has sent ripples across industries and international relations, prompting both sharp criticism and reluctant adaptation from nations worldwide. At the heart of this new trade paradigm is a tiered tariff system, a more complex and some might argue subjective approach than previous iterations. While a new standard 15% rate applies to a broad swath of approximately 40 countries, including major trading partners like Europe, Japan, and South Korea, a third group of around 30 nations faces significantly higher duties, ranging from 18% to a staggering 50%. Notably, over 100 countries with whom the U.S. currently maintains a trade surplus have been exempted from these latest hikes, retaining their existing 10% rate. Furthermore, the administration has moved to eliminate the de minimis exemption for low-value imports under $800, applying tariffs to these goods from August 29, and has threatened a punitive 40% tariff on products rerouted to dodge duties, a measure believed to target goods originating primarily from China. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer affirmed on Sunday that these recently imposed tariffs are pretty much set and unlikely to be cut in ongoing negotiations, signaling the administration's resolve. The global response has been immediate and varied. The European Union, for instance, confirmed that its goods, including cars and car parts, will face a flat 15% tariff upon entering the U.S., a rate that includes the most favored nation MFN tariff, and will not exceed this cap even if duties on items like semiconductors and medicines are raised. Despite a recent trade deal, the EU still anticipates turbulence in its dealings with the US. Meanwhile, India has vociferously pushed back against President Trump's threat to substantially raise tariffs on its exports, particularly over its purchases of Russian oil. New Delhi denounced the move as unjustified and accused the U.S. of a double standard on trade with Russia, vowing to protect its economic interests. Trump, for his part, asserted that India was buying massive amounts of Russian oil and selling it on the open market for big profits, directly linking this to the proposed tariff hike. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi countered by encouraging citizens to buy local goods, emphasizing national self-reliance amidst the atmosphere of instability in the world economy. Switzerland finds itself among the hardest hit, facing a steep 39% tariff that has stunned its export industry. Industry associations warn of tens of thousands of job losses, prompting calls from Swatch Group CEO Nick Hayek for Swiss President Karen Kellersutter to meet with Trump in Washington to negotiate a better deal. The country's role as a major hub for gold refining, which inflates its export figures to the U.S. without commensurate profit retention for refiners, has been highlighted as a factor in the dispute. Despite the severity, Switzerland's business minister Guy Parmelin indicated openness to revising their offer to the U.S. Neighboring Canada, now facing a 35% tariff, found its trade negotiations complicated by President Trump's linking of a potential deal to its support for Palestinian statehood, a stance he publicly criticized. Beyond these high-profile disputes, the administration has also announced a mix of concessions and new deals. Mexico received a 90-day reprieve on higher tariffs, though other duties on metals and cars remain. A full and complete trade deal was reached with South Korea, setting a 15% tariff on imports but securing a significant $350 billion in U.S.-controlled investments and $100 billion in LNG and other energy product purchases. Pakistan also struck a deal with the U.S. to develop its untapped oil reserves and lower tariffs. Conversely, Japan's Bank of Japan warned that U.S. tariffs are likely to hit corporate profits and delay capital expenditure plans, signaling caution for its export-dependent economy. Progress in trade talks with China on rare earths has been reported as about halfway there. But a major sticking point remains Washington's demand for Beijing to halt Russian and Iranian oil purchases, a demand China has firmly rejected, asserting its right to secure energy based on national interests. Smaller nations like Bangladesh, however, found some relief, successfully negotiating its garment tariff down to 20% from an initially proposed 37%. The reverberations are keenly felt across corporate boardrooms. NVIDIA's main server assembly partner Han High Precision reported a sales slowdown for July directly attributable to U.S. tariffs. Automaker Mazda forecasts nearly a $1 billion profit hit, while beverage giant Diageo warned of a $200 million impact and a flat full-year sales outlook. Even Berkshire Hathaway's consumer goods businesses are feeling the pinch. Luxury watchmakers like Rolex are bracing for the Swiss tariffs, and footwear companies including Nike and Deckers are under pressure from new rates ranging from 10% to 40%. The copper market experienced significant volatility, with Trump's 50% tariffs on semi-finished products triggering a record plunge in U.S. prices after exempting refined metals, causing a sudden reversal for traders who had profited from anticipating the levies. German carmaker BMW, however, maintained its full-year guidance, citing its substantial manufacturing presence in the U.S. as a mitigating factor. Economically, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell acknowledged the early beginnings of tariff-induced inflation, noting that companies, much like during the first Trump administration, are raising prices in a group to protect margins, citing examples like Procter & Gamble and Mondelez. Despite these price increases in certain categories, Powell indicated that longer-term inflation expectations remain anchored around the central bank's 2% goal. Yet he conceded that the dynamic nature of these trade negotiations means it doesn't feel like we're very close to the end of that process. And that's not for us to judge, but it feels like there's much more to come. This sentiment echoes broader concerns from experts like Barry Appleton, co-director of the Center for International Law at the New York Law School, who observed, "In many respects, everybody's a loser here." The consensus points to a demolition of the old rules-based global economic order, replaced by a system where the U.S. leverages its immense economic power to extract concessions. The political commentary surrounding these economic shifts is equally vivid. Radio host Charlemagne the God, following an interview on Fox News, critiqued President Trump's second-term economic record, arguing that the least of us are still being impacted by the worst and that reforms to programs like Medicaid would hurt the poorest Americans. Trump swiftly responded on Truth Social, branding Charlemagne a racist sleazebag and defending his economic border and foreign policy achievements. Charlemagne, while laughing off the personal insults, rebutted the racist claim, pointing to Trump administration actions on diversity and civil rights programs. He nevertheless expressed that he was rooting for Trump to succeed on the economy, reflecting a complex public engagement with the president's policies. Even seemingly peripheral events such as President Trump's praise for a Sydney Sweeney ad can send market signals, as evidenced by American Eagle stock soaring 23%, underscoring the broad and sometimes unpredictable influence of the presidency. As the new tariff regime fully crystallizes, the global economy's resilience will be put to the test. The current landscape is one of constant negotiation, strategic maneuvering, and the re-evaluation of supply chains. While some nations have managed to secure more favorable terms and certain industries adapt, the overarching picture remains one of significant uncertainty and disruption. The shift from a predictable rules-based trading system to one defined by bilateral deals and the threat of tariffs suggests that businesses and governments alike must continue to navigate a turbulent and evolving international trade environment with economic and geopolitical implications that will undoubtedly shape the coming years. The political landscape of the United States is currently gripped by a series of escalating confrontations that underscore a profound challenge to democratic norms and the integrity of its institutions. From a dramatic legislative walkout in Texas to the intensifying rhetoric around immigration enforcement and an unprecedented interference with federal statistical agencies, recent events paint a vivid picture of a system under immense strain where loyalty to a single figure appears to eclipse traditional tenets of governance. The most immediate flashpoint erupted in Texas this week, where dozens of Democratic lawmakers staged a dramatic walkout, leaving the state to deny the Republican-dominated House of Representatives the quorum necessary to conduct business. Their aim: to temporarily block the passage of a controversial redrawn congressional map championed by President Donald Trump that would add 5 more GOP-leaning seats at Democrats' expense before the 2026 midterm elections. This move, a desperate measure to preserve their party's U.S. House majority, comes as Trump's political standing reportedly falters. Texas currently sees Republicans holding a nearly 2-to-1 advantage with 25 of 38 seats, despite Trump winning 56.1% of the state's ballots in 2024 compared to Kamala Harris's 42.5%. House Speaker Representative Dustin Burrows urged Democrats to show up to do their jobs, while Texas Governor Greg Abbott swiftly issued civil arrest warrants and ordered state troopers to apprehend the absent lawmakers, though those physically outside Texas remain beyond state jurisdiction. Democrats, however, have dismissed Abbott's threats as smoke and mirrors, asserting his lack of legal authority. As U.S. Representative Julie Johnson, a former state legislator, starkly put it, "I never thought as a Texan that I would see the governor of the proud state of Texas bend a knee to a felon from New York." This legislative impasse has far-reaching implications, not only delaying a vote on critical disaster assistance following last month's catastrophic floods that killed 136 people, but also igniting a broader national dispute. Democratic governors like New York's Kathy Hochul and Illinois' J.B. Pritzker have openly supported the Texas Democrats, with Hochul declaring, "We're not going to tolerate our democracy being stolen in a modern-day stagecoach heist by a bunch of law-breaking cowboys." She added, "If Republicans are willing to rewrite rules to give themselves an advantage, then they're leaving us with no choice. We must do the same. You have to fight fire with fire." This defiant stance signals a new era where Democrats, as U.S. Representative Mark Vesey noted, are no longer going to unilaterally disarm. Parallel to the redistricting battle, the Trump administration's aggressive stance on immigration has intensified, drawing widespread criticism and raising concerns about civil liberties. Tom Homan, Trump's border czar, recently faced pointed questions about the efficacy and ethics of escalating ICE raids. Despite the administration's claims of targeting criminals, ICE statistics reveal that as of July, more than 70% of the detainees do not have criminal convictions. This shift stems in part from demands by presidential advisor Stephen Miller, who reportedly excoriated senior field officers for low detention numbers, asking, "Why aren't you at Home Depot? Why aren't you at 7-Eleven?" This directive has led to a doubling of ICE detentions from an average of 17,000 per month earlier this year to nearly 35,000 in June. The human cost of this ramped-up enforcement is becoming increasingly apparent, with recent high-profile arrests including a local police officer in Maine, a high school graduate in New York, and a visiting academic at Georgetown University. Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey voiced grave concerns, stating secret police are running around the country picking people up off the streets who have a legal right to be here. Public opinion polls reflect a clear decline in approval for Trump's handling of immigration, dropping from over 50% to around 40%, with a record 79% of Americans now believing immigration is in principle good for the country. This growing resistance, fueled by community networks and apps like IceBlock, suggests that the administration's cuts are getting deeper into American communities, potentially pushing the country toward a much darker phase of surveillance and enforcement. The common thread weaving these events together is President Trump's seemingly unyielding demand for loyalty, even at the expense of established democratic processes and factual integrity. This was starkly illustrated by his unprecedented firing last Friday of the nonpartisan employment statistician heading the Bureau of Labor Statistics (BLS). Trump's surrogates claimed the move was for more accurate data, but the president himself ranted on social media that today's jobs numbers were rigged in order to make the Republicans and me look bad. This action follows a pattern, including earlier instances where White House officials reportedly blocked the release of farm data that showed an increasing trade deficit. As Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer observed, what does a bad leader do when they get bad news? Shoot the messenger. Experts widely regard U.S. economic data as the gold standard, globally produced through transparent and apolitical methods. This executive overreach, coupled with the blatant partisan gerrymandering in Texas, signals what G. Elliott Morris describes as parallel signs of a decaying democracy. Morris argues that this is not merely about Trump but Trumpism, an ideology that places loyalty to the party leader at the center of the belief system, where the normal rules of politics, elections, and democracy no longer motivate the elites in this party. The gerrymandering in particular illustrates a system where politicians pick their voters rather than the reverse, fundamentally undermining electoral accountability. This disdain for any outcome where Trump or his party might lose is evidenced by his 2020 call to Georgia's Secretary of State for just 11,000 votes suggests a leadership that views democracy not as a method for legitimate opposition but as a referee to be bribed. The current political moment, therefore, represents a critical juncture for American democracy. The accelerating erosion of norms, from the weaponization of redistricting to the subversion of independent government agencies and the increasing harshness of state-sponsored enforcement, raises profound questions about the future of a system reliant on mutual toleration and respect for facts. While resistance is growing and public opinion is shifting, the power consolidated within the executive branch, backed by a party seemingly willing to prioritize loyalty over foundational principles, poses an existential threat. The potential for a permanent secret police and a government that distrusts its own data underscores a trajectory toward authoritarian governance. Whether the nation pulls back from this brink or continues its accelerated slide will depend on the willingness of individuals across the political spectrum to reassert that country must come before party and that no one, not even the president, is above facts or the fundamental principles of a Republican democracy. The stakes, as many observers now warn, could not be higher. The American economy finds itself at a critical juncture as a series of recent reports paint a concerning picture of slowing growth, rising unemployment, and the specter of an economic phenomenon not seen in decades. This confluence of factors, exacerbated by specific policy decisions and upcoming key appointments, has market observers and policymakers alike holding their breath, pondering the path forward for the nation's financial health. The latest figures from the Bureau of Labor Statistics (BLS) have sent ripples of alarm through economic circles. In July, the U.S. economy managed to add a mere 73,000 jobs, a stark slowdown that falls significantly short of the 80,000 to 100,000 jobs needed just to keep pace with population growth, let alone the benchmark of 200,000 monthly additions considered indicative of a healthy economy. Compounding this, the BLS revised its May and June figures downwards, revealing an even more dismal average of only 35,000 jobs created per month over the last three, marking the worst such period in a decade outside of the 2020 COVID-19 downturn. This anemic job creation has pushed the national unemployment rate to nearly 4.3%, with black worker unemployment soaring to a recessionary level of 7.2%, the highest since October 2021. Manufacturing, a sector President Trump vowed to revitalize, has also seen jobs disappear for 3 consecutive months, with employment down 173,000 since its peak in early 2023. This deteriorating job market appears to be a direct consequence of the administration's economic policies, particularly its aggressive stance on trade. The widespread and erratic application of historically high tariffs has injected a significant degree of uncertainty into the global marketplace, leading to a palpable loss of business confidence. This in turn has made business owners reluctant to invest and hire, creating a chilling effect on economic activity. U.S. manufacturers, many of whom rely heavily on imported inputs, are particularly hard hit by an effective tariff rate of approximately 18%. Ford, for example, a major domestic automaker, recently cited an $800 million impact from these tariffs as a key factor in its first quarterly loss since 2023. The Wall Street Journal further noted that new tariff deals with Japan, the EU, and South Korea are placing U.S. companies at a disadvantage, increasing their costs and undermining their Made in America strategies. Beyond trade, other policies are also contributing to the economic headwinds. The administration's war on immigrants is actively reducing the labor supply, despite a nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office report from just a year ago suggesting that immigration could bolster the U.S. economy by some $7 trillion over the next decade by expanding the workforce and stimulating demand. However, the deportation of immigrant workers, who are crucial to sectors like agriculture, construction, meatpacking, landscaping, and hospitality, is creating significant labor shortages. Furthermore, a concerted effort against the federal workforce attributed to the president and Elon Musk resulted in the loss of 12,000 federal jobs in July alone and 84,000 since January. The cumulative effect of these employment failures is profound. The ranks of the long-term unemployed. Those out of work for 27 weeks or longer swelled to 1.83 million from 1.65 million in June, reflecting a deepening reluctance by companies to hire. This decline in employment naturally leads to suppressed wages, a reduced demand for goods and services, lower tax revenues, increased pressure on social services, and constrained performance of retirement funds. Perhaps most concerning, for the first time in decades, the U.S. economy is grappling with the simultaneous challenge of increasing prices and increasing unemployment, a phenomenon known as stagflation, which notoriously plagued the economy in the 1970s. This unique inflationary pressure driven by the tariffs has wisely led the Federal Reserve to hold interest rates steady, issuing the typical rate cuts that would normally be deployed to stimulate a faltering job market. The administration's response to these troubling economic indicators has been as predictable as it is concerning. Following the release of the abysmal job numbers, the director of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Erica McIntyre, was reportedly fired. This move, echoing previous instances where the administration has dismissed inconvenient data or officials, suggests a pattern of denying uncomfortable facts and making up its own, as seen with the elimination of climate change and infectious disease statistics that contradict official narratives. Such actions, particularly when it comes to the integrity of nonpartisan agencies like the BLS, erode public trust and cast doubt on the reliability of official economic reporting. Financial markets have reacted sharply to this combination of weak job numbers and high tariffs, with Wall Street experiencing one of its worst weeks since the president took office. While a temporary backing off of tariff increases after a market tank in April provided some relief, the current trajectory raises questions about whether the administration will heed market signals this time. As CNN highlights, the president is about to make 2 key appointments, and the choices made will be closely scrutinized, with the very faith in the economy hanging in the balance. Republicans, too, are expressing growing concerns that the tariffs are actively harming the economy, adding to the pressure on the administration. Looking ahead, the path remains uncertain. The firing of the BLS commissioner, as some analysts suggest, may well be a canary in the coal mine, portending more serious economic problems to come if current policies persist. The critical question remains, will the administration adjust its course in response to mounting evidence of economic damage, or will it double down on policies that appear to be pushing the U.S. towards a challenging period of stagflation? The decisions made in the coming weeks and months, particularly regarding economic policy and key appointments, will undoubtedly shape the trajectory of the American economy for years to come. The political landscape of the United States continues to be a crucible of contention and economic shifts, with recent developments highlighting the profound and often paradoxical impacts of federal policy on states and industries alike. From unprecedented legal skirmishes over state funding to a burgeoning boom in defense technology, the current administration's actions are reshaping domestic governance and global strategic investments, demanding a close watch from both policymakers and market observers. California, a perennial bastion of progressive policy, has emerged as a formidable legal bulwark against the Trump administration's directives, successfully safeguarding an astonishing $168 billion in federal funding through a series of proactive lawsuits. As revealed on August 4, 2025 by the Governor of California's office, this monumental achievement stems from a mere $5 million investment in litigation, translating into an eye-popping 33.60% return on investment. Governor Gavin Newsom articulated the state's stance, declaring California's early proactive and defensive actions have helped California maintain its values in the face of wholesale attacks against our families and communities, while also serving as a backstop against tyrannical actions by President Trump and those who aim to ignore the rule of law. This robust legal strategy, coordinated with Attorney General Rob Bonta, has seen California file 37 lawsuits, leading or co-leading 23, and submit over 40 amicus briefs in just 6 months. Of the 19 cases where early relief was sought, the state secured victories in 17, with 13 orders currently in effect blocking what California deems illegal federal actions. The financial implications of these legal victories are staggering. An early lawsuit challenging a sweeping freeze on federal funding preserved approximately $168 billion, representing about one-third of California's state budget. Funds crucial for a net donor state like California. Beyond this initial win, California's legal team has protected an estimated $11.1 billion in federal grant funding from successive targeted efforts. Attorney General Bonta underscored the gravity, stating, when the administration's first effort to freeze all federal funding to California failed, it changed course, flooding the zone with near constant attempts to cut off funding like a dangerous and unruly game of whack-a-mole. But this is not a game. We're talking about people's livelihoods, their health, their education, and in some cases even their lives. Specific successes include blocking unlawful immigration enforcement conditions on $7 billion in transportation funding, securing $939 million for schools by compelling the Department of Education to reverse a funding freeze, and protecting approximately $972 million in critical public health funding for California. Even the future of sustainable infrastructure was defended, with a court order restoring over $300 million in funding for electric vehicle charging infrastructure that the administration had sought to withhold. Beyond fiscal defense, California has also actively countered efforts perceived as undermining democratic institutions and fundamental rights. This includes challenging the unlawful federalization of the California National Guard, where nearly 5,000 soldiers were deployed without gubernatorial authorization in Los Angeles. While 4,700 soldiers have since demobilized, the case continues to trial, aiming to establish the illegality of such military deployments. The state has also fought to prevent the dismantling of federal agencies like U.S. Health and Human Services and AmeriCorps, defended birthright citizenship against an executive order that could deny citizenship to an estimated 24,500 children born in California annually, and safeguarded sensitive private data from federal misuse, including Medicaid and SNAP recipient information. Simultaneously, the broader economic impact of the Trump administration's policies is manifesting in other sectors. As reported by the Financial Times on August 5, 2025, President Trump's Big Beautiful Bill has triggered a notable boom for defense tech startups. This surge in investment and activity within the defense technology sector underscores a shift in priorities and a readiness to funnel significant resources into military innovation, likely driven by the administration's emphasis on national security and defense spending. This trend suggests a dual effect of federal policy. While some states battle to retain existing funds, other industries, particularly those aligned with perceived national security imperatives, are experiencing significant growth. This complex interplay of domestic legal battles and strategic industry shifts also resonates on the international stage. The Newsweek report published on August 5, 2025, referencing a rising defense partner reacts after Trump threat. Hints at the global ripple effects of the administration's assertive foreign policy stance. Such reactions from international allies or adversaries underscore a climate of geopolitical uncertainty where shifts in U.S. defense posture and rhetoric can directly influence the strategic calculations and defense spending of other nations, indirectly fueling the very defense tech boom seen domestically. In essence, the current political climate is defining a new era of governance characterized by an unprecedented level of intergovernmental legal contention and a recalibration of economic priorities. California's successful defense of its fiscal and societal values against federal overreach offers a compelling case study in state autonomy and judicial recourse, while the simultaneous boom in defense technology illustrates how federal policy can selectively stimulate certain sectors. As these dynamics continue to unfold, the ongoing legal battles, evolving defense landscapes, and international reactions will undoubtedly shape the future of federal-state relations, technological innovation, and global stability for years to come. In a rapidly evolving global landscape, the foreign policy of the United States under the Trump administration continues to redefine international relations, marked by a blend of transactional diplomacy, shifting alliances, and an assertive pursuit of perceived national interests. From the battlefields of Ukraine to the complex dynamics of the Middle East and the intricate web of global trade, Washington's approach is proving both unpredictable and profoundly impactful, drawing both praise for its disruptive potential and criticism for its perceived undermining of long-standing norms. A significant recalibration is evident in Washington's stance towards the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, particularly concerning its relationship with Russia. After an initial period characterized by President Trump's seemingly friendly overtures towards Vladimir Putin, marked by comments about their shared experience of the Russia hoax and even a gift of a presidential portrait to his chief negotiator Steve Witkoff, a noticeable hardening has emerged. This shift appears to stem from repeated rebuffs and intensifying attacks on Ukrainian civilians, leading Trump to express frustration, stating during a recent visit to Scotland, "Every time I think it's going to end, he kills people." This growing impatience has culminated in a stern ultimatum, with Trump setting a tight deadline, reportedly as short as 10 or 12 days, for Russia to engage in a peace deal, backed by threats of new sanctions against trading partners. This pivotal moment is prompting European allies to consider a new form of checkbook diplomacy, where they would proactively purchase crucial U.S. weapons such as Patriot defense systems for transfer to Ukraine. This model, particularly championed by Germany given its fiscal flexibility and good relations with Trump, signals an end to the era of direct American arms deliveries, shifting the financial burden and logistical responsibility to Europe while ensuring continued military support for Kyiv. This transactional approach extends dramatically to Washington's relations with key partners like India. Despite a history of close ties and India's strategic importance as a counterweight to China, President Trump has not shied away from imposing significant pressure over its continued substantial purchases of Russian oil. In a series of Truth Social posts, Trump lambasted India, accusing them of buying massive amounts of Russian oil and then reselling it for big profits, adding pointedly, "They don't care how many people in Ukraine are being killed by the Russian war machine." This rhetoric has been swiftly followed by threats of substantially increased tariffs on Indian products, potentially reaching 25% or even 100% for countries continuing to buy Russian oil. India, through its foreign ministry, has pushed back, highlighting that the U.S. had actively encouraged their initial purchases to stabilize global oil prices and vowing to safeguard its national interests and economic security. This dispute underscores India's long-standing, time-tested partnership with Russia, which includes being Russia's second-largest oil customer and its top arms buyer between 2020 and 2024. The sudden pivot to punitive measures alongside Trump's public embrace of Pakistan and claims of brokering a Kashmir ceasefire illustrate a foreign policy where traditional alliances can be swiftly subordinated to immediate perceived U.S. leverage and transactional outcomes. Perhaps the most surprising shift, however, is the nascent potential for a diplomatic reset in the Middle East, particularly with Iran. Following a devastating 12-day conflict between Israel and Iran, which saw both sides exchange missile barrages and revealed the limitations of military force, with U.S. and Israeli missile defense systems intercepting only a fraction of Iranian missiles at immense cost, a fragile ceasefire now holds. This moment, according to some analysts, presents a rare window for transformative diplomacy. The argument posits that decades of sanctions have fostered a pragmatic nationalism within Iran, tempering its revolutionary zeal, while the U.S. is strategically retrenching from West Asia to prioritize competition with China. This alignment of circumstances could pave the way for a Perso-Abraham Accord integrating Iran into a new regional security framework through mutual recognition and economic reintegration. Such a move would require the U.S. to offer tangible incentives like investment in Iran's civilian nuclear technology with stringent monitoring, and for Israel to abandon its ideological Manichaean worldview in favor of diplomacy. While significant obstacles remain, particularly Israel's staunch opposition to normalization with Tehran, the prospect of Trump leveraging this opportunity for a historic peace deal, even a Nobel Peace Prize, is being openly discussed as a defining act of his presidency. Beyond these major flashpoints, the Trump administration's foreign policy continues to manifest in various forms, often characterized by the weaponization of tariffs. Switzerland faced tariff shock after a call with Trump, and Brazil saw tariffs used to punish its government for a coup trial against a Trump ally. Domestically, protests against the Gaza war, including arrests at a Trump hotel in New York and growing calls from Jewish American groups for increased humanitarian aid, highlight the significant public pressure on the administration to address the worsening crisis in Gaza, which Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff described as a death trap and which Trump himself has acknowledged as real starvation. These multifaceted engagements underline a U.S. foreign policy that is less about traditional multilateralism and more about bilateral leverage, personal relationships, and a readiness to upend established norms in pursuit of specific, often immediate objectives. As the global chessboard continues to shift, the long-term implications of this distinctive U.S. foreign policy remain to be fully seen. Will this transactional approach lead to a more stable multipolar world by forcing allies to shoulder more responsibility and adversaries to the negotiating table, or will it further destabilize regions by eroding trust and creating unpredictable flashpoints? The coming months will be critical in determining whether the Trump administration's bold, often unconventional diplomatic maneuvers forge a new, more effective global order, or leave behind a legacy of fragmented alliances and heightened international volatility.